welcome to another episode of the Ali Show. And today we have a very special guest, Mr. Mazbou Q, music artist. And you're definitely a very interesting person, character. Like, I feel as like every time I watch like your stuff on social media or wherever that you post, like there's just so much energy that comes out of you, man.
Thanks,
Anyway,
bro.
Before we get into it, how are you, Mazbou?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. I'm a little bit tired at the moment. I had a really good show last night. It was my first time playing in Tamaki in 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. The show that I played last night was actually supposed to take place this time last year.
Okay.
But after a series of postponements due to COVID, we finally
So many
got it done.
restrictions as well, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Must have been a big hit for you because you, as you said, was what, 2 years?
Yeah. So my last show in the city, my last headline show was one that I put on for my sophomore EP when my name was still Unchained Excel, and then I sort of took a break from playing shows to write some more music to release in 2020 and tour. I released music, but obviously I couldn't tour it because of COVID, so I had to try and find spaces when COVID sort of relaxed its restrictions to get a show in there. But every time I tried, the restrictions would come back, and yeah, it took until last night to finally happen.
Wow, that must have been awesome.
Yeah, it was a
Long
big
wait,
relief, a long wait, and a lot of people who were there have been waiting to see me for some time. So yeah, it was exciting.
Yeah, I saw a lot of the videos that people posted and all that. There's quite a big turnout.
Yeah, it was not too bad. I was pretty happy with it.
So when did you get into music? Like creating music and all that sort of stuff. When did it start for you?
I think for me, actually creating music started in high school, but my musical journey began much sooner than that. So my parents sort of pushed me into classical piano when I was very small, about 4 years old, and I sort of developed in that until I got to intermediate school, and I met someone who sort of introduced me to the world of rock and roll, drums, guitar, bass, middle, and I fell in love with middle and rock, and that was my first love for a while. Throughout high school and even into uni, I was very much a middle kid, and hip hop was only on the side for me. And it was only sort of when my sort of escapades in middle came to an end, and I still wanted to be doing music some way. A friend of mine that I met after uni sort of pushed me more and more into rap, and I found that I might have something, might have something there. So yeah, and then I just
Carried on from there. The thing with your music as well, which what interests me is there is a lot in the lyrics. There's like hidden messages and like things you're trying to put out. How did you, or why did you have that kind of? Why was it important for you to have that kind of style or that?
Yeah,
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video.
Yeah, I've done a lot of reflecting on this, and actually, it was only recently I was having a conversation with a friend, and I sort of, because I'm very much an external processor, and I learn things about myself when I have conversations with other people. I realized that I think a lot of my insightful, deep, thoughtful political messaging comes from my time in the metal scene, because that's common. It's common for metal bands to be hugely political or hugely socially conscious. It's common to stop in the middle of a show and have a korero about some issue that's happening.
Really?
Yeah, very, very, very common.
Wow.
So that was the kind of culture I came through. So I guess naturally when I came into hip hop, I was used to just putting these kind of heavy messages in my music. And all it took was for me to sort of translate what I was doing there into the current context of hip hop and sort of look at myself and what I wanted to communicate about myself. And for hip hop, and for me, that was my identity. That was my sort of coming to grips with my African Kiwi cultures and African New Zealander identity, and how complex that was, and how it took for me to unlearn a few things and learn a few things. And yeah, it sort of developed from there, and it was only natural that came forth in my music.
Bro, I've got a lot of questions just from what you said there. I have so
absolutely.
many questions, but
Cool.
okay, I'll try to process that. But the first question that came to my mind was, what are some of the biggest messages you try to put out in your music?
I guess one of the biggest ones for me is the story of the third culture migrant. Actually, probably not currently, but definitely that's where my journey began as Unchained XL Mazbou Q. And so it evolved. So it only makes sense for me to talk about my music in that context. So I was one of the first. My family was one of the first Nigerian families in Aoteoroa,
Wow.
and and even one of the first African families in Aoteoroa as well.
Wow.
In the early '90s, there were not many of us there, and so growing up as an African New Zealander meant the culture that I was living was one I was simultaneously creating. Like there was nothing that had been done before me for me to look at and be like, okay, this is how we move. This is how we, this is what we do. This, So my experience was very much one of when I was growing up in high school. I was like, well, I didn't want to be black because being black meant being different, and that's the last thing you want to be in high school. So I wanted to assimilate and be white essentially. So sort of coming into my blackness, I realized, okay, there are a few issues here. What I experienced when I was younger is actually this thing called racism, and it's not just the insults or the mocking or the teasing. It sort of sits within this larger system. What is this system? Oh, okay, it has a global context. The system makes sense within what's happening globally to the continent of Africa, to African diasporans all around the globe. Okay, what is that? Oh, actually, this matters. Let me talk about this. And so, as I sort of deep dived into my own identity, I started learning things about how the world works, and I'm like, actually, there are a whole lot of things I need to be talking about in my music. So that led to sort of more broadly political, socially conscious stuff. And as I sort of evolved in that messaging, I discovered at one point I'm like, okay, it's great to talk about this, but I'm more than like as a human being, I'm more than just like this political stuff. I feel other things, and that was a great broadening for me. That sort of was the transition from Unchained XL to Mazbou Q. Unchained XL was very tightly political, like racism, politics, Nigerian politics. A lot of that kind of heavy stuff, and I kind of boxed myself in quite ironically because I was called Unchained XL. I boxed myself in into as a rapper who would only talk about that stuff, but I realized, as I said, that I'm more than that. You know what I'm saying? I feel other things, I see other things, I witness other things. As a musician, I should be able to express myself, you know,
In whatever way
in
you.
whatever I want. How am I going to do that with this brand? That's not going to work. So I'm going to have to expand my brand to be more me. And the moniker Mazbou Q. Mazbou is an anagram of my last name Ozumba, and Q is like phonetically matching to Hugh. So like Mazbou Q is essentially my name. And that symbolizes the fact that who I'm becoming as an artist is more completely me. So now what you'll hear in my music, you'll hear the political stuff, but you'll also hear some vulnerability that was not there before. Vulnerability outside the context of racism, you know what I'm saying? Just about me as a person, all this kind of stuff. So now it's like, it is conscious rap, but it's not just political. It's like, it's being vulnerable. It's being just in touch with oneself in a more complete way.
You were talking about growing up here. Were you born in New Zealand, or did you spend your childhood back in Africa before you came here?
I was born in the UK actually. So my
Oh.
parents, So my parents are Nigerian. They were born in Nigeria and grew up in Nigeria. Did their postgraduate studies in the UK. Had me and my sister. Came to Aoteoroa when I was 18 months old. So essentially, like, I have the same experience as Africans born in New Zealand, but technically, no, I wasn't born here.
Yeah, but so at 18 months, you pretty much can't remember.
Might
much.
as well have been.
Yeah, can't remember much. Anyway, so I'd imagine it's like growing up. It must be hard, like when kids look at you differently, like that sort of thing, and being one of the first, like the very few families here.
Yeah. So I think the thing is, it was like kids are looking at me differently, but I felt like I didn't have anywhere to recluse to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm different, but here's my refuge of people who are the same as me. That was the issue. The closest thing to that for me was like the Black Americans I'd see on TV, rapping and hip hop culture and all that kind of stuff. So the difficulty faced by me and people like me was like, well, why do New Zealanders find these people cool but not find us cool? And that was a hard thing to grapple with, because it was like, well, we're kind of like them, but we're not like them. So what are we like? Who are we as African New Zealanders? Because we don't have the same experience as continental Africans, even though we do. There's a lot of crossover. We still don't. But at the same time, we don't have the same experience of those whose ancestors were like, went to the country and they descended from those people. So like Black Americans and Caribbeans. So, you know what I'm saying? Like we've got this quite a different experience, and how do we navigate it? Like, where do we fit in? So yeah, that was the difficult one, because we were creating something that we were living.
And sorry, what was that in? Have you spent most of your life in Auckland, or was it?
Yes. Yeah.
In Auckland. The other thing I wanted about what you were saying just now is, you started playing music, like playing instruments at a very young age, and I understand you actually can play quite a few instruments yourself.
Yeah.
How many instruments can you play from?
It's not that many. Just like comfortably 4. But
that's
well, like comfortably, like I do enough so I can produce, because I'm a producer. Yeah. So I do enough so I can produce my songs, and I generally tend towards organic sounding stuff. So I'll more likely have something like a real drum kit, or at least real drum kit parts, have an actual bass guitar line, have some guitar parts and all that kind of stuff. And that means that I need to be able to play those at least to a level that I can sort of manipulate it and make it sound sort of useful.
Yeah, people struggle with one instrument, and as a producer, it is quite important for you to
to have a command on a few instruments, and obviously be able to sing. I think definitely being sort of grafted into the music world from a young age, it was the reason it's possible.
Came quite naturally to you.
Yeah, and it means that if I was to try and learn another instrument now, and I have like such a fundamental understanding of music, that it would come a lot easier for me than for someone else.
And yeah, because I saw like a lot of your videos that you do in your space. It's really cool space that you have, and you produce and you record all this stuff. I was quite fascinated by just that whole setup you have, that little studio. It's really cool. So after you started like getting into music, getting more serious with it, at what age or when did you start like performing in front of like crowds and all that?
Yeah. Again, so this is so as I said, like I grew up sort of in the metal world. So the first, I guess, experience I had really performing in front of people was in my middle band. I had a band called East of Eden, and when did we start? We started around 2009. And then we went all the way up to 2014. But we toured New Zealand and we did that kind of thing. And that sort of constituted my first like on stage as a vocalist experience, getting to know what it's like as a frontman, interacting with the crowd, breath control, all these kind of things I learned from that. So when I came into hip hop, which was late 2015, and started writing my own stuff and eventually performing, it was not a new experience for me. I was like, I've done this before, just a little bit differently.
But back to that first ever experience of like, being in front of people. How was that for you?
It was interesting. The reason why it's hard to even call that the first is because I grew up in church.
Okay.
And I was in church music band. So I had the experience again of being in front of people every week playing music. So even going into this middle band, playing in front of people, I'm like, yeah, but it's still not that different to what I'm used to. I'm still used to people looking at me playing music. So yeah, it's hard to say what the first experience was like, because it wasn't any
that wasn't really like the first one. But you seem like a very confident guy, and I don't I don't think being in front of large crowds would pose a problem to you.
No, it's not the size of the crowd, it's who is in the crowd that can get me nervous. Like if I know that if I'm playing a very high stakes gig, I think the most nervous I've ever been was a show back in 2018 called Going Global. And that's a music conference put on by Independent Music New Zealand. And the whole point of it, the showcase part was where the artists come in and perform. The whole point of that is having a bunch of industry people from around the world in one sort of space and getting them to go between all the different bands playing. So like me playing there, I was aware that I'd be playing to different managers, booking agents, you know, people of that caliber from around. And that was like, oh, like the crowd was only like 50 or 60.
Yeah.
Like I've played the crowds much bigger than that. But for some reason, well, not for some reason, for that reason, I was like, okay, man, you know, I really have to.
There's a bit of
really
pressure
have to
there.
do real. Yeah. So it's that kind of stuff that makes me nervous. But honestly, it makes me nervous right up until the point where the first chord is struck. As soon as the music starts, like, and I'm playing, that those nerves just vanish. Yeah.
And you know, you talk about like making your own music, creating your own songs, and all of that. What is the, you know, like, I'm not very familiar with the process, but like usually, if for example, if we talk say a fight, you know, you train in the gym for a fight.
Yeah.
So like what is the processes you have to create all this stuff? Like what do you do? How do you get, you know, inspiration or like?
Yeah. So for me, because I started as an instrumentalist, more often than not, my initial ideas are always like a melodic line or some kind of rhythm that will just be playing in my head. And it will usually happen at the most inconvenient time. It will never happen when I sit down. I'm like, all right, today I'm going to write a song. It always happens when I'm like shopping for something, or I've just gone to some meeting out, like where I'm nowhere near my studio, and I'm like, I've got this idea, and
And it hits
I've
you.
got hours until I get home. You know what I'm saying? Or like 3 a.m. And I've just woken up and I need to go to the bathroom. I'm like, oh, that's a good melody. It's always that time, and so I have to figure out how to capture that. Usually just a voice note on my phone, and then when I get a chance to sit down in the studio, I've got this melodic line or this rhythm, and then I'm like, okay, what instruments will make sense of this? Like, is it a vocal line? Is it a guitar line? Is it a synth line? Is it a drum beat? Is it an 808 thing? So I sort of play around with arranging it, giving it different textures, and when that starts to evolve, I'll get something like a beat to about a 60 to 70% skeletal kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, this is enough for me to catch a lyrical vibe, determine what my vocals are going to start doing on it. So I'll take the beat away, maybe go for a few walks, have my headphones on, try and come up with a hook and a verse and stuff like that. And once I sort of get the vocals pretty much 80, 90% there, I'll go back, record a demo of the vocals, go back to the beat and be like, all right, how are the vocals and the beats synergistically working together? What do I need to do to the beat to complement the vocals? And then it becomes a kind of a process like that. Like for people who aren't producer and lyricist or a rapper, I understand it can be quite a different process. Like they'll might have a whole song done and just find a beat which works with the song, or they'll look for a beat. And once they've found a beat, they'll write a song to that beat. But for people who are usually like producers and vocalists at the same time, it's always this kind of evolving synergistic back and forth interplay of both. Because like your mind can't really commit to one because you have the power to change either. So yeah,
there's a lot of freedom there, you know.
Yeah.
And do you think it's better to?
It has its pros and cons. So its pros, in my view, is that you end up making more musical pieces of work. And what I mean by that is that usually when people listen to my music, they're like, it's not normal hip hop. Like there are sections to it. Like the music really sort of takes you somewhere. You use different chords, you use different rhythms, you know, all these sort of different little quirks and different ideas that come in. And that's a cool thing. The main drawback, I think, is the speed in which you can produce and put out work, because you have to come up with the lyrics and the vocal rhythms and the vocal melodies and the beat and the production. It means that every song you put out sort of takes a little bit longer. Whereas, you know, someone who's just a rapper, they just search for beats. Once they've got 10 beats, they're like, all right, I've got an album. All I need to do is write the songs. You know what I'm saying? Whereas with me, like I was like, I have to come up with 10 beats and 10 songs, you know? So yeah, in that sense, like you can't output as much as quickly, I would say, as yeah.
And after you've got all like you've done your stuff, how hard is it to like what are the like the barriers to get the music out there? Like I understand yeah this this is something that I don't fully understand, but
I don't think anyone does.
yeah, I've heard a little bit here and
I don't
there.
think anyone does.
Maybe you can, share with
Yeah.
us a little bit about it.
The barriers of getting it out there. Well, I don't even know where to start with this. Well, so I think one of the biggest issues at the moment, and I always forget this word, but Spotify, it's not called a monopoly. It's not a monopoly. It's the reverse to a monopoly. So a monopoly is when you've got one company that's got so much market control that everyone has to buy to them. Now, the reverse of this, I think it's called like a monotony or something. Maybe, no, that sounds wrong. But anyway, the reverse of that is where a company has got such market control that in order for you, if you're a seller, in order for you to sell your stuff, you have to sell it to them. That's what Spotify basically has over artists in most of the Western hemispheres. Arguably, apart from the US, where Apple Music has a good market share as well. But basically in Aoteoroa, Australia, Europe, if you're an artist and you don't have your music on Spotify, it's not going anywhere. So the issue is, okay, you're committed to Spotify, right? How do you make Spotify work for you? Well, you make Spotify work for you by either already having a giant fan base. If you don't have that, if you're an indie artist on the come up and you want to cultivate a big fan base, what do? Oh, well, you obviously make playlists. You make songs and you get them on these editorial playlists with thousands of listeners, and then your songs start to accumulate listens. People start to follow you. People start to engage with you and so on and so forth. Okay, easy. Just make a song that gets on a playlist. How do you do that? I don't know. I don't know. Like some of my songs get on there. Most of them don't. And the discouraging thing is like, if they don't get on there, it's pretty hard for that song to go anywhere. Unless you have a good $2,000 to $3,000 to sink into every song that you put out, to put into Facebook ads and YouTube ads and all that to sort of generate sort of plays and streams that way. But if you don't have that, like most indie artists, then it's hard. So I guess all you have to do is word of mouth. The approach that I have been taking this year is frequent regular releases. So instead of the traditional model of, for example, you want to release an album, you might put out one single 1 month, second month you put out another single, third month you put out another single, and then the fourth month you drop the album, right? That's the standard way of sort of doing it. So you get like 3 singles that have some attention on it, and then the album which might have 6 or 7 more songs or something like that. I've done that a couple of times with a couple of EPs. The issue I find is that you get some light on those singles, but then you have a good 6, 7, 8 other songs that you've spent just as long trying to get, construct and to write and to, do all this stuff with, that don't really get any, like maybe 1 or 2 more might get some attention, but then you've got all these other songs that only your really, really dedicated fans are going to listen to and no one else is going to hear. So it's like, unless people are already waiting and expecting this album, what was the point in that album? All of a sudden, you've put a year's worth of work, you've put it out in a couple months, and you're tired and you're done, and you're like, okay, I need a break. I need to write some more and put some more out later. That used to work when the way you would get your music out there was through CDs, but now we're in a culture where, it's streaming. We're in a culture where you've got thousands of songs being uploaded to streaming platforms every day. That kind of model seems to be a bit insufficient now. So what I'm doing is I take the concept of an album, and instead of dropping a couple singles and the rest of the music, I drop every single on that album as a single every 2 weeks. I believe there was a artist called Russ who had a model of doing a single a week for like 2 years or something that.
That was how I came to my question.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And I guess for me, I thought a week would probably be too much.
Yeah, that's like too short of a time frame. It's a lot of pressure, man.
Because you're like, I have to give some time to actually promote the single. So if you're doing it every week, you drop a single, you might promote it for a day, and then the next day you're like, all right, there's another single coming out soon, and then your promotion seems like it all becomes one blur. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So 2 weeks gives one song, Some Time to Breathe, I think. That seems to be working quite well for me. So the song that I just released yesterday was my 5th off this kind of
Of the
this
album.
album. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. And I've seen like I look at my Spotify metrics and I see like a steady kind of growth. My listenership is going up, all that kind of stuff. And what I'm seeing is that because I'm always out there, I'm always releasing something. I'm in the industry's line of sight. So I'm hitting these grant opportunities. I'm hitting these show opportunities. I'm hitting these blog opportunities because they're like, oh yeah, he's doing stuff. Oh, there he is with another song. There he is with another this. There he is with some photos. What? Ooh, there's another song there. You know what I'm saying? So
Active and like,
active and visible, because at the moment you're competing with a highly saturated market. So you just need to be on the ball.
Hey guys, stop letting your body go on in pain and feeling sore all the time, man. Start putting some deposits in your health bank and take care of your vessel. Go get yourself an amazing massage gun from Sharpened Recovery. It's a very affordable and lasts a long time. Highly recommended. It probably costs less than 5 meals outside and definitely cheaper than a pair of shoes. Instead of getting something that's going to be on your feet, why not get this massage gun to massage those feet and legs? Go to sharpenedrecovery.com and use the code AliChannel for 20% off your guns. Yes, 20%. You can thank me later. So what are you waiting for, guys? Go get yourself some amazing gear.
You were mentioning about like, how Spotify sort of, and that whole situation there.
Yeah.
How important is it to like put your stuff out on other platforms like, Apple Music, YouTube, and then even like SoundCloud or this, that, whatnot? Like, do you really in this day and age, you need to like spread it across or?
I don't really know the answer to that. I think you disadvantage, like, because most distribution services and and companies, they just put your music out to everywhere anyway. I think you disadvantage yourself if you restrict your music intentionally. But that said, there are, like, for example, SoundCloud has its own like community and its own subculture and all that kind of stuff, and you can be very much a SoundCloud person. So for me, all I do is I put the music that I put out on other way, I just put on SoundCloud. I don't put any effort into marketing on SoundCloud, investing in that community, engaging with other, it's a very social media-ish kind of platform. I don't put any effort into that, and so like obviously I don't see any really returns from that, but it is useful to have on there because the odd person will stumble on it and be like, oh, this is cool. But I think I think there are obviously major players. There's Spotify's the major player, Apple Music second, and then you do have like Amazon and sort of Bandcamp's coming up as an alternative where it's not streaming. It's sort of the more traditional model of buying music again. So yeah, I think it's important to have your stuff on all of there, but not having your music on one of them is definitely not a deal breaker. Like, you can blow up on any one of them, to be honest with you. Yeah.
And talking about like labels, management, and stuff like that. How is it a must to like get with that, or to have a manager or label, or
I go to and fro on my opinion of this. Obviously, there are examples of artists who have done it without label help or even management. There are disadvantages to that, but there are some advantages. So labels are obviously, it's no secret, labels are in it for themselves. The moment you sign to a label, you are sort of resigning to the fact that, okay, this label is going to exploit my work. And exploit has a lot of
it's a heavy word.
yeah, it has a lot of negative connotations. But in the music world, exploit basically just means use for the advantage. So that label is going to use your music to sell and to get them money, and you'll get royalties. So if your music does really, really, really well, that works for both of you. If it doesn't, you could get yourself in a tricky situation. Thankfully, in theory, labels have the ability to push your music a bit further than you might by yourself. So it's more of a chance that your music is going to do well. As an indie artist, you obviously aren't tied down by a label saying, we might need your music to sound like this. It should go. You have a lot more autonomy, but then the trade-off is that you don't have typically speaking, you don't have the networking capability. You don't have the broad reach that these labels have. But nowadays, like maybe like 20 years ago, nigh impossible to make it without a label. Now that we have the internet, everything is moving towards this peer-to-peer thing. Anything you could do could go viral. You could put out a song, goes viral on TikTok. I think that's how Old Town Road got really big. TikTok. You know what I'm saying? So like, you don't need label and necessarily. And there are definitely cases where labels recognize that, oh wait, we need this artist more than they need us. So yeah, it's not necessary, but it can be difficult. Like I'm at the stage at the moment where I'm like, I would have loved to not organize the last night show. You know what I'm saying? Like, as much as I love playing it, I would have loved to just hand it off to someone, and that person just being like, "I got it. I'm doing all this kind of stuff." Mazbou, you show up, you play the show, you go home. You know what I'm saying? That would have been wonderful, because that means that leading up to the show, I could have committed more of my time and more of my energy to producing more of the music that I'm being releasing later. Doing my own practice and rehearsal, producing for other artists, something I also do. You know, like it would have freed me up to do music, which is the thing I'm supposedly doing. But instead, like I was bogged down with a lot of admin, emailing stakeholders, preparing. Like I do all my own graphics, I do my own posters, I plan my own social media. I'm always in everyone's face. I'm literally DMing people, bruh, buy your ticket. Like I'm in people's DMs. They got so angry with me, but I'm like, you know, I'm doing what I'm just. But you know, like having a team to do that would be great. But you know, like, yeah. So it can, yeah, it can benefit.
That's just how it is. Like, you know, the landscape here. It's hard to.
Yeah.
You kind of have to do it, but you know, from your experience of doing that, it's like that's a job of a whole team.
Yeah, man. It really is. It really is.
And you know, having to do that and perform yourself, like.
Yeah, and it's funny because every time I run, because I've been running shows since 2017. I remember I had a conversation with the artists because I was like, why am I not getting any shows? And they were just like, run your own shows. I'm like, yeah, actually, why don't I do that? So I started running my own shows back in 2017 for the purpose of just putting me on there. Run a show, make sure I'm on the bill, boom, I have a show. It got to the point where I'm like, okay, actually, I never want to play a show that I'm running because the stress is too much. And it's funny because every time I have run a show that I play on, I'm like, never again. It's never going to happen. But then I get in a position where I'm like, well, I kind of just have to do it. Like no one was going to run my Auckland show for me. I wouldn't have had an Auckland show if I didn't run it. So I was like, oh, here we go in.
Why are there not, since you mentioned about that, why are there not much people out there who are doing this, like running these events and shows?
There are. It's just that I haven't managed to line up with them. Yeah. Goodness knows why. Yeah, if any promoters or booking agents, you know, like please. Yeah, please. Do it for me. Yeah. No, I actually have a really cool booking agent. His name's Ruben from Banished, and he's been doing some great work for me. But yeah, I would love a broader team for sure. Yeah.
So talking about you know, like trying to line up other people, you know, how hard is it to get like do you need to have like a certain theme or does it not really matter
when it comes to putting artists on your
on a particular show? Do you have a process that you have to have certain type of music or?
Yeah, well, for me personally, like you want someone who there's enough overlap between both of your styles or both of your sort of messages or co-poppers such that their audience, when they see you, are probably going to be interested in you and so on and so forth. You know, the cross-pollination of fans. But you want them to be different enough so that you can't, like, so that you just don't have the same fan bases. You know, like you have other people being like, oh, I haven't heard of it, or, you know, I haven't listened to this guy. So it's that's a tricky balance. Sometimes you can go too far one way or too far the other way. So it's just experimentation. But then also you're just limited by your networks as well. Like for me, like it's not as if I have a pool of every artist in New Zealand and I can be like, oh, you ultimately is who I know. Like I'm going to hit up like 9 times out of 10, I'm going to hit up who I know just because it's easier. They're going to reply to me. They're more likely to say yes, less likely to be skeptical of my ability to run. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of it is constricted by your network and your relationships. So
Back to the point you were saying about like promoting yourself on social media, just to get your name out there, you know, get people to know you and all stuff like that. How hard is it like for you? You know, as someone who likes to focus on like your craft and what you're doing, and then to also be like a businessman,
yeah,
or you know, to be like an advertising agent of
yeah,
your
yeah,
own.
yeah, yeah.
How has that been for you? Like trying to
Um,
push your stuff on socials and all that.
yeah, it's hard, but I mean, I recognize it's something that not only artists and musicians deal with, but it's like anyone who gets into business has to play a multifaceted role at the start because you know you don't have the luxury of just employing departments off the bat. But yeah, like I guess now that I'm a few years in, it is still a little bit frustrating that I'm having to put so much energy into doing all that stuff, and it's simply because the return that you get from music is not like. Now, some people might flame me for this, but I'm going to say the return that you get from music is not like other business. If you're in a business where you're selling products or you're selling services, in general, you're at least going to see some stuff sort of coming in for your investments. Even if you're not breaking even, you're going to see. With music, the return on investment is tiny. Unless you've really broken, the return, like what we get from Spotify and Apple and YouTube is you're not getting anything, man. Like the money that you are getting is coming back from shows, and like last year, what was happening with shows? Nothing. So what do we like? And it's funny because we're so in the industry. We're like, you know, you need to be doing music videos, like music videos. These videos cost tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
People watch them on YouTube. You might get like 1,000 views on YouTube. That's not going to even give you a few cents. Where did your $10,000 go? So you need to have a very much a long-term brand development investment mindset, and you just have to trust that one day these things are going to pay back. Now the issue with that is that one day is over here, but right now your funds are here. You know what I'm saying? But you need your funds to be here to employ all these people. So that's the issue. So you get people who are independent, who are like, okay, I'm at the stage where I do need all these teams, but I can't pay you, right? So what's the solution for that? You get a label who has that capital, who can put that stuff in. They can say, okay, I will invest this in you and this and this and this in you, right? All sounds very well, but you better hope your music does well, because that all that money is not free. You know that it's a loan. You know what I'm saying?
What's the like what's the cut, or what's like how do these labels operate? Or
I've never had a major label deal, but I have heard of major label deals offering like a 10% royalty, 20% royalty. So what that means is that of $100 that you make, the label takes 80 or $90, and you take 10.
whoa, really?
Yeah. But you know,
That's like a big percentage, man.
Yeah, but so and that's why it's like when it comes to major labels, it's generally considered. So when you sign like to a major label, there's this thing called an advance, right? And that's basically the initial loan that you get from the label. And what that loan is to record, it's to produce the music. So, for example, it could be $1 million, could be 500,000. Here's this amount of money to record the music that is going to make us the main money. But it's also the money that you live on, because you're not going to see any other money potentially for another couple years. You know what I'm saying? Like, because you put $1 million into an album, you better live off the rest that you don't use on that album, because unless you're making a whole bunch of money back, you're not even going to repay that $1 million. Because a lot of, I think this is right, some people might correct me, but my understanding is some label deals are like, we take 100% of the money until you've paid us back that $1 million, or however advanced, and then after, that's when we take that's when you start getting
Your
royalties.
10%.
Don't even worry about your royalties. You know what I'm saying? Until we get that million back, and then you start getting. You know what I'm saying? So like that's what I'm saying. So that's why you need to milk your advance, because that's all you're gonna see.
Damn.
Then that's why it's like you better pray that your music does well. You better pray that you didn't just get $1 million advance and your music went nowhere, because you're in a situation where you owe that label a lot of money. How are you gonna give the label money? Oh, I'm produce another album. Oh, it costs more money. Might need to top up my loan. That's how artists get really screwed, man. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's a crazy.
Yeah.
You know, you watch like, you know, a lot of documentaries and movies and, you know, saying like telling stories, but they don't really go into detail.
Yeah, bro.
When you find out about these things, it's crazy how, you know, yeah, like what
And
you
that is
said.
why actually the most wealthy artists are not making most of their money off music. The most wealthy artists have built up their brands to a point where they can leverage their name to use use another business adventure and make
their
that go.
money.
Like Diddy. What does Diddy put out in the last while? You know what I'm saying? But he's like what, the second richest, or he might even be the richest, because he got his name to a point where it was like Diddy's cool. Right now, look, Diddy's got this other brand. Oh yeah, you know, let me buy that product. Or
endorsements
Rihanna,
and
Fenty. You know what I'm saying? Like or like sponsorships. Like music is not the thing that gets you the money. Music makes these labels money. The artists, what they get from music is the brand. Like obviously like someone like Justin Bieber, like whose sales like 2 billion, 3 billion streams. He's making money off music for sure.
music,
but I guarantee you that's not his
main source of income.
yeah bro.
Because that's what like they use to get themselves out there.
Exactly.
They have all the other, which is brings me to like what we were saying just now about Russ and what he was saying about why he doesn't have a label. And he did there was a video I watched like quite some time back about, he just gave like a breakdown explanation of when an artist makes a certain amount of money, why they don't actually make that money.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and a lot of artists, like, you know, we talk on a global thing where they get into a lot of trouble with like you know, with the tax and like not knowing how to, you know.
It's crazy. So you might be playing sold out stadium shows every week, but once the label takes their cut, management takes the cut, booking agents, you split it between the band, tax, all a bunch of stuff, costs. You know what I'm saying? Like, you might not have that much. Like, I know of stories of people who've been in bands who are playing stadiums and they're living off like $25-$50 a week. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like, you know, like, yeah, it's a very there's lots of smoke and mirrors in this industry for sure. And it's very much a case of your brand being the more powerful thing to use elsewhere. And even it's not even on a huge scale, even on my scale right now. Like, I've made more money from producing for other people than I have from streams and stuff of my own music. People come to me to be produced because I'm Mazbou Q, right? So I've leveraged my name to do something else that makes me money, right? So I can see how that model continues, and the more that my name sort of increases, the more that more that brands are going to come be like, oh, we want Mazbou Q on our thing. We're going to pay Mazbou Q $100,000 just to sell our product. $100,000. Wow, that's more than I've made in my entire. You know what I'm saying? Like, so yeah, like I definitely think it's understated how much that is a thing. Yeah.
What is the music industry like here in Aoteoroa,
bro? It's frustrating. Okay, so I can only really speak from my experience, and my experience is one of, I feel like Aoteoroa has quite a narrow, I'm gonna say like a narrow path or lane of what they sort of think is pushable, or what they think is what they assume that the mainstream crowds are going to enjoy and like. And if you sort of deviate out that a little bit, you're not really gonna go. So I always tell this people, because, and it's partly because of our population, partly. I also think there are some cultural issues, but partly because of our small population. If you fall out of the mainstream and you fall into some niche crack, right? And you're like, oh, I'm not really making middle of the road music. I'm making a little bit different music, but some other people might like it. If that's you and you're in the States that has a population of 350 million, your niche market could be 1 million people. Now, if 1 million people are all listening, all streaming your music, all paying for your gigs, or you can make a living. You can be like, there are tons of artists in America that we have not heard of who are easily making a living off their music with no problems, who we'll never see on the billboard, you know what I'm saying? But they have a niche audience of 1 million, even 500,000 who are sustaining them, right? Now, what happens when you have a niche sort of fan base in a population with 5 million people? Maybe 1,000 if you're lucky, 500. That's your niche. Like, what are 500 people going to do for you? Like, it's great. Like, it's great having 500 human beings that love your music, but they're not going to finance you, right? They can't do that. So I think what you find in New Zealand is that you got all these people who start off being like, yeah, man, I'm gonna make music how I like it, and then they realize that it's not sustainable at all. So they sort of gravitate towards this middle of the road. I mean, that happens all over, but I think it's more, this effect and phenomenon is more pronounced in smaller markets because they realize, okay, in order to do anything, like I need to toe the line at least for a while until the gatekeepers sort of let me in. Yeah.
Which can be a little bit discouraging if, like, you have your own style, you want to push your own style, but you sort of, in a way, you sort of get pushed to a corner.
Yeah.
Where you're like, man.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to kind of like, sort of get in line with that if I really want to like make anything out of it.
Yeah. And I think the frustrating thing is though that, and this is why I was saying it's not entirely a population thing, it's partly a cultural thing. There's this issue of tastemakers being the same people who say that they are just being like receivers for what the crowd likes. So they say, oh, no, the crowd likes this, so they push this kind of music. But they don't realize that in pushing that kind of music, they're telling the crowd what to like. So mainstream radio in Aoteoroa is very notorious for this. Like I always ask myself, what is the reason that you are not playing at least 80% New Zealand music? What is the reason? You cannot tell me it's not because there's not enough. There is enough. There are plenty of artists making good music, right? Why are we still playing 20-year-old American music? You know what I'm saying? Why do we need to wait for May, New Zealand Music Month, to play 50%?
There is a New Zealand Music Month?
You didn't even know that? What? That's what I'm saying, bro. So, like, we've got 1 month that we supposedly dedicate to backing New Zealand music. The rest of the year, we might give it token 10 to 20%. I mean, there's some radio stations and blogs that are really trying to push it, but in terms of the mainstream radio stations, they're not doing anywhere near enough. And I don't think they realize what that actually does. We see how powerful it can be for New Zealand artists when radio and media gets behind them. 660 plays 5 or 6 stadium shows every. They're the first musical act to play Eden Park. That is insane. Like, no global act has done that, and that is pretty much because for whatever reason, the radio stations are like, let's play 660 every day, 5 times, 6 times a day.
Yeah.
Right? You got people who listen to them. They're like, I don't really like 660, but oh look, I know all of their songs. Okay, I'm gonna go to the gig.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the power of the radio getting behind an artist. So I'm like, why aren't you just doing that for everyone? Right? Like, you can't say, oh, people just don't like New Zealand music. That's not true. People don't hear New Zealand music. If all you heard on your car trip to work and back home was New Zealand music, that's what you will like.
Bro, you just said it.
That's
bro.
what you will like, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what you'll know. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, this artist that I'm listening to every day is playing a show for $15 down the road. I love them. I'm gonna go watch them. Right now, you friggin' approach your average Joe or Tom or Sarah on the street and you'd be like, yo, when have you last been to a local show? They're like, oh, local show? What, you mean a concert? You mean like 660? No, not 660. Oh, you mean at LAB? No, like there are 5 bands that they, might have gone to, but no one goes to local shows. But you would if all the music that you listen to all the time that's bombarded to you, that you see is being played by local artists. You would go to local shows. Of course you would, because it's the music you love, right? So it's quite insane to me that we have like these radio stations that aren't do like it make 80 to 90% should be New Zealand music, and if that happens, watch the industry absolutely transform.
Hey, you.
Absolutely.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video.
Why is there any particular reason that like the radio stations are not pushing more of the local music?
What
is the rationale behind that?
Man, if anyone figures that out, let me know. Again, I suspect it's not having the awareness that you are a tastemaker, as being like if you're a radio programmer, you're not just someone who has your finger on the pulse of what is hot right now. You're deciding that. I don't think people are aware of that enough. They might, like, a lot of people sort of know, but I don't think they realize like how powerful it is to be like, this song is on the A rotate, because you hear what's going on, you hear what's popular overseas, you're like, oh yeah, it's popular overseas, it must be popular here. No, it's popular here because you put it on the radio and it's playing every day. That's why it's popular here, right? So they think they're just being conduits of what is really popular, but they're actually like constructing the narrative of what's popular.
I've heard before someone on the radio say, make some comments about this, about he was trying to push more of like the local artists and the local music, right? And there was some like restrictions or some limitations, like they didn't want to. I don't know if they.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I actually just thought of something else. So obviously listenership is a big thing, right? Making money through adverts. So if for example, one radio station radically changed such that they all of a sudden started playing 80 to 90% New Zealand music, and for a while, because that's what New Zealanders aren't used to, they're like, not feeling this, let me go listen to all my favorite American songs from 20 years ago on this other radio station. All of a sudden, that radio station loses 50, 60, 70% of its listener base. It loses, like, advertisers don't want to advertise. That radio station loses money, right? So it makes sense that they don't want to do that. They want to stay competitive. So the only way that this is going to work is if, for example, it's put into law and every radio station simultaneously has to do this. Because if it's just left up to like the prerogative of these radio stations, they're kind of stalemating each other, right? Because naturally, if your favorite radio station all of a sudden suddenly changes, you're instinctively going to be like, I'm not really about this. Like I like what I'm used to. You know what I'm saying? But that's only for a time. That's only for a time. Like, we've all experienced the phenomenon of hearing a song once and being like, I don't really like this song. Hear it for the 10th time. All of a sudden you're singing it. And then hear it for the 20th time. Damn, this is my song. You know what I'm saying? Like, Gangnam Style? Why was that the biggest song in the world? I promise you it was not the biggest song in the world because it was a great song. I promise you it was not. You know what I'm saying? Like, but yeah, so there's this saying, like, people don't like, it's crazy. Like, this really, really blew my mind. I was like staring at the wall for a while. Someone's like, bro, people don't like music. People like popularity. I did think about that. I'm like, what does that mean? I'm like, then so a light bulb went off and I'm like, no, that's true. Like, if something has clout behind it, people are way more likely to, you know what I'm saying? Way more likely to
jump on that shit.
Jump on it, So that's what I'm saying. Like, how do you create that clout? You push it and.
Sorry, just give me a second.
Yeah, okay.
I'll just check. I did press it. Yeah, sorry. It was just bugging me.
Yeah.
See it. Yeah. Man, that is so true. What you're saying about
Yeah.
if there's clout,
Yeah.
just jumping on that ship there, which is like with a lot of things as well. Like talking about the Gangnam Style, like because it had that it was funny. It was this thing that this guy was doing, and I think more than the music itself, it was the guy and the thing he was doing.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they created that movement, and
Yeah.
everybody just
Kind of, it was like memeified almost.
yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. But that it was still decided essentially that was like it's not completely one way or the other. It is a sort of synergistic thing of deciding that it's cool and it kind of being cool and those kind of things working together. But you definitely need the factor of deciding it's cool. So one thing I always think about at the moment, because I used to be a lot more traditionally African with my music when I was Unchained Exile. I was very much like a lot of the traditional African high life stuff came through in my music, to the point where a lot of the features I got on were other African New Zealanders who were bilingual, who spoke their native tongue. And I'm like, I'd love for you to sing or rap in your native tongue on my language, because how cool would it be to have an African language on mainstream New Zealand radio, right? So I create these songs. I get told, oh, like, we like it, but we're not sure how accessible it is because, it's not in English. I'm like, at the start, I'm like, oh, no, that makes sense. But then I was like, wait a minute. I turned on the radio and what was I listening to? Despacito. What? Okay. So do we speak Spanish in Aoteoroa? But that's what I'm saying, like, because that was that was a popping song. So all of a sudden it doesn't even matter that it's in Spanish. So I'm like, people don't really realize that, like, it's not a matter of it being popular. You kind of have to, you just have to jump behind it. If it's cool, if you think it's cool, push it. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't be like, oh, what are other people,
This is what I think about, like, like pushing, the locals or pushing people around you. I don't know why it's a thing. Like, people always struggle, it's always heavy to share or to, to push the local guys. You always want to push the, the big names, the popular guys and stuff like that. But, and then, which in a lot of ways, I put it this way, like, for example, a person that I can name would be like Israel Adesanya, right? Izzy's, it's interesting, in his story, like when he was up and coming and all that, like not a lot of people here, wanted to talk about him or push him or like,
of course,
for many reasons, and for one of them being because he looks different. Or, he's not the same color, or, that sort of thing. And then now to like where he is, and suddenly you see, everybody wants to get a slice of that cake. And, like you look at that, and I like he's trying to change. There was something he said to me just recently as well. I'm really trying to look at or limit who I talk to, which the organizations and whatever that he talks to as well. Which I think it's in what he's saying. There's a lot behind that that statement that he made, and I was like, he's trying to push a message of his own as well, like, and I think that's hopefully that helps, to push other people to kind of because you can't wait for someone to get to that point, and like, look at it this way, in like music, for example, like it's gonna be hard for like the young artists, the new artists who want to come in. There's just like there's so much barriers now, like, or stuff that's stopping them from and like there could be a lot of great artists, but because of how the landscape is here, they just get like shut down real early. And that was why I was asking about, what's the industry like here? And it's tough, man. It's tough. If you don't, if local people don't support the people around them, like
yeah, man. I try and
push that.
I try and every time I play a show or have an interview, I try and make a point of saying it is so important for people to go to these local shows and support the local musicians, because all these musicians that you love to see, that you pay $300 a ticket for to go see at Spark Arena or wherever, from overseas, they were once at the local level, and they only rose because they had a community of people who were dedicated to supporting them around them. So, like, if you want to see Aoteoroa artists doing that locally and overseas, you have to do the same thing. You have to go to these local, and it's quite insane. Like, I was thinking about this like yesterday. Or no, actually, I've been thinking about this for a long time, but sort of it heightened in my mind yesterday. Like, I was like, online tickets to my show were $15, right? $20 at the door. And I'm like, when I think about the thousands of hours that have gone into me learning how to play music, the thousands and thousands of dollars gone into me producing, recording, mixing, mastering that music, marketing that music, the hours of effort I put on to planning the show, executing the show, marketing the show. I'm like, and then I'm selling, and then it's not just me on the bill. It's another artist who's also put their thousands of hours into doing what they do. DJs who've, done all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, you guys get to come and experience this for $15-20. Some of you guys won't pay that money because you're like, $20 is a bit too steep. I'm like, bro, like, you will go and buy a burger for $22, eat it in half an hour, and never remember that thing again. Never even think like you ask someone what burger they ate 2 years ago. They're never gonna tell you because they don't know, right? But if they go to a show and they like the music, they're gonna remember that for a long time, maybe the rest of their lives if the show is good enough. So I'm like, why is it hard to get people to come and experience this thing, A, that can sort of stay with you forever, B, that it's taken so much talent, so many hours from different people putting in to, all this kind of stuff, and it costs $20 and you won't pay that money. I was like, really? Like, what people got last night, they should have paid way more than that for. But the reality is, if you charge way, no one's going to do it. But it's kind of crazy, right? It's kind of crazy to think about.
What do you pay for, like, a ticket to go to Spark Arena? $150 at least, or something crazy
for the
like
cheap
that?
seats, bro.
Yeah.
For the cheap seats at Spark Arena, yeah.
That's like way up at the back. $150,
That's what I'm saying.
$160.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's mad.
$15 probably cheaper than a drink.
Dude.
Right?
15, like, I was thinking about it. I was like, $15 is an absolute joke. Like, what?
Yeah, man.
Like, I routinely spend more than that on food. Routine, without even thinking. I'll be like, oh, $18, yeah,
Yeah, that's like a, man.
Even worse when it comes to like buying music. Bro, the whole reason why iTunes was subsumed, I think that's the word, subsumed by like Apple Music, streaming platforms, subsumed purchasing music. The whole idea is because the consumer is able to pay a subscription and get an infinite number of songs, as many songs as they want, right? They don't have to pay a whole, oh my gosh, $1 for a song? I can't believe that. That's crazy. Why would I pay $1 for this song that took $20,000 to record, market, and put together? It took so much hours of songwriting, producing, skill development, artist development. All this kind of stuff goes into one song, put it up there. Why would I pay $1 for it? That's crazy. I'll go out, by the way, and pay $5, $10 for like the most average coffee from Starbucks. You know what I'm saying? Not even think twice about it, but $1 for a song? No way. That's crazy. Don't give me that. I need to pay $12. I need to get 100,000 songs. You know what I'm saying? Like, bruh, like, it's actually the craziest. And the nuts thing is, you pay $5 for this coffee, you have the coffee, it's done. It is done. You pay $1 for the song, you have that song forever. Forever. And people like
struggle with it.
People struggle with it, such that there needs to be another model that like.
Is that I think maybe that's also why the reason why streaming platforms have been like doing really well.
Oh, it is. It's because it benefits the consumer. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, people rather jump on
on that. But yeah, back to what he said about like, people struggling to pay $15 for a ticket. But, for example, if like a big name
Yeah.
from overseas
Yeah, they'll pay
comes,
10 times that.
yeah, way more than
Yeah.
10 times
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's crazy. Man,
But yeah, and the thing is, like, the music is not necessarily always way better in quality. You put some of these local artists on those big stages, they're gonna make music just as good / better than some of these people. But it's been decided that it's been decided by the radios in New Zealand that these artists are the hottest thing ever, right? So when they come here, you're like, oh, well, I need to see them. This is my song. This is my artist.
Talking about that, with the launch of all these other platforms like Spotify, this, that, whatnot, how much impact does radio have now, these days? Would you say still the same or not as much?
Definitely not as much impact. So a radio has been, it's still a lot, still more than I think we give credence to, but definitely not as much. Now we have like the Illuminati of Spotify curators or Apple Music creators, whoever they are, and they decide what music is popular.
Who to put where and what playlist and what.
Exactly.
Yeah, this was what I was going to ask. So, yeah, so is it essentially there's like a team who does that, or do they look at like the numbers, or?
I have no idea. From what I understand, it is partly algorithm based and it's partly human discretion. So I think like you as an artist, you sort of pitch your music, and then real humans will listen to it, as that's what they tell us. And these humans are like, yes, this song is good enough for me to put on this playlist here. And then from what I understand, after that, depending on how well that song does, the algorithm will change its position in the playlist from week to week or whatever, drop it out, or that kind of stuff. So it is, both of those are working together, but it's definitely the human component, and it's definitely not like this kind of unbiased selection process. It's not this thing of people being like, I'm going to blindly listen to all these songs and whichever one tickles my fancy I'm putting on. It's definitely like some labels have bigger sway. I think labels have actual stocks in Spotify, so labels can be like, yo, our artists like get first dibs, which I mean, you can't really blame them for, but it's like because it's their system and they can do what they want. But again, that's a problem with monopolies, because if you're a monopoly and the only way to survive is to go through you, then if you have the mentality of, well, it's our system, you're free to go anywhere else. No, we're not really free. We're not really free to go anywhere else.
It's sort of like when brands or products want to sell their stuff at a supermarket. Like you can pay more to have it on the eye level shelf, right? Instead of having it right down the bottom, all the way up top, and nobody can reach the shit. You think about it, it's crazy. There's there's obviously a lot of stuff that we might not know, or more especially me, like I might not know a lot of things, but like, when I think about it and you dig deep into it, like I actually get quite surprised, by a lot of this stuff. Man, it's very interesting, very interesting. The other thing, I want to ask about, like, the recent single that you released, which came out, was it 7? Was it yesterday?
Don't Stop Regardless?
Yes, Don't Stop Regardless, yes. And I like the visuals for that. And, we were just talking about how it takes, to spend a lot of money on producing the videos and this, that, whatnot. I like the theme for that. Could you tell us a little bit of the theme of the song?
Yeah, absolutely. So the song itself envisions a hypothetical time traveler from a dimension where Africa is liberated, free, socialist and prosperous and all that kind of thing. I guess for people who haven't imagined that kind of thing, Wakanda is a good way of thinking of it. So a time traveler from there sort of comes into our present, and they are tasked with providing messages of encouragement for Africans in our diaspora at the moment. So for people like me, like who have an African identity, who have sort of thought about like what would it be like if Africa could be amazing. That time traveler comes back and says, yo, keep fighting for your continent, keep fighting for your homeland, organize together, fight for justice, keep marching for all the George Floyds, keep marching for all the NSAS stuff, keep marching for the situation in Ethiopia and so on and so forth. Keep fighting for justice, because one day there will be freedom for the continent, and it will be awesome and amazing, and it'll be everything that you want it to be. But you have to keep fighting and don't stop, regardless of the obstacles or the challenges that you face in the way. So that's what the song is written from the perspective of that time traveler, and the message is that. So the visuals that accompany it, that are coming on Tuesday, that is like a mini documentary that I guess in a way captures part of that time traveler's mission. So part of the mission is that time traveler comes to Aoteoroa, and he appears to a few creatives of African descent here, gives them visions of that future Africa, and then those creators go away and are inspired by it, and then create these works. So, and where the documentary comes in is like they interview these creators and ask the question, now that you've seen this future Africa, what does it mean for you? What is it? And the beauty of it is everyone speaks from their own very real, very personal experience of having African descent. And what I have done in this doco is that I have been very careful with who I've selected as these creatives. I've selected people who are all members of the African diaspora, but with different experiences. So one person who spent a few years in their home country, so they've got a very real connection, not a real, but a very sort of immediate connection with their homeland, right? They know the language, and it's right there. And then I've got someone who's more like me, who sort of was basically born here. So their identity is more wrapped up in this sort of African Kiwi duality. And then I've got someone whose ancestors were enslaved, and they are descendant from those enslaved people. So three radically different diasporical experiences, and three different ways in which a future Africa would change their life, and then the doco explores that.
Wow, that's like a story behind just that couple of minutes. It's like a whole story behind. That's really cool, man.
Yeah.
Can I ask, like, who are some of the artists that like you take inspirations from, or who you look up to?
Around the world?
Yeah.
So I guess the artist that I sort of pushed me along the path that I am going at the moment would be Sean Kuti, son of the legendary Fela Kuti. Jidenna, Manifest, I'm going to say Tobe Mwigwe as well. So they're all like sort of Afrocentric sort of hip hop artists who have this sort of conscious, like Pan-African-ish sort of flavor to what they do. And they've got this, always slanted towards liberation, slanted towards justice, but they're also, the way in which they communicate these messages is very like modern and somewhat accessible and fresh and all that kind of stuff. They're still very much cool. The cool hip hop artists are cool, like Afrobeat artists, like they appeal to people, but they are putting these messages, and then they've got this sort of aesthetic of Afrofuturism, freedom, liberation, all this kind of stuff. And it's very much where I want to go down.
Yeah. You mentioned Fela Kuti, and how I got to know about like him and his music was through Anthony Joshua, who's the boxer, and he walked out to the song.
Fela Kuti,
and when I heard that song, immediately I was like, man, I fell in love with that, man.
Yeah.
And then I started to listen to all his music, and it's crazy how I got to know about his music from boxing. Obviously, I listen to a lot of African music, like on Spotify, like African Hey No Wahala, all this playlists are constantly on my, But Fela Kuti wasn't on there, and then when I got to know from AJ's, I was like, yo, man, I love his music.
Yeah,
man.
well, I guess like I think of Fela Kuti as the Bob Marley of Africa.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like people who listen to modern reggae now, like Coffee and or like dancehall and stuff, like dancehall kind of music. That's all because of Bob Marley and his era. Like that's the music that influenced this music. So like all the Noah Hala, the Wizkid, the Davido, the what's his name, Burna Boy, and all that kind of stuff. They all have Fela Kuti to thank. But yeah, it's a different, very much a different style. It's an evolved style, but yeah, they're at the root.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Anyway, Mesbo, I don't want to keep you on for too long. We've come to the section now. Wise words from the wise men. So
Mm,
people who are watching, listening, what advice
what
would you
advice?
give them?
Yeah, there are probably two things. One thing is for like artists who are sort of getting into it and wondering like how they approach like songwriting and how they approach sort of making music and how they can sort of make music unique and stuff. I always encourage people and exhort people to explore themselves and become increasingly self-aware and never stop the journey to know themselves better, because once you do that you will make more radically authentic music, and that's the kind of music that people are going to gravitate towards, a story that is authentic, because when people sort of know instinctively what's authentic and what's not, and they sort of lean towards the authenticity because they see where it overlaps with their own story. So for me, that was getting real with the fact that I've got this complex African New Zealand identity. What does it mean? How does it affect my life? What's it going to mean for my future generations? As I unpack that story, I get not only African New Zealanders that are interested, but I get people of other ethnic backgrounds who have their duality experience as well. Because they're like, whilst I'm not African, I resonate with the fact that, he's got two cultures that he's trying to figure out. Me too, you know what I'm saying? So that me being authentic with myself, me being vulnerable with myself, invites other people in who have an overlapping experience in different spheres, and they take interest in it. So that would be the thing, and on it's just an amazing journey for yourself. You grow, you become a more complete person when you learn about yourself. So that'll be the first thing. The second thing would be, like, again, the conversation we just had, the need to really invest in Aoteoroa music, New Zealand music. And it's something that you have to be intentional to. You have to make the choice to do it in the same way that we make the choice to be conscious consumers. We make the choice to be like, oh, you know what, this piece of clothing was probably not manufactured ethically. And I'm not saying that listening to like music from America is on the same par as buying non-ethical clothes. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm drawing a parallel to the intentionality to which you need to make the change. If you want to help transform the New Zealand music industry, you have to be like, nope, let me not listen to this today. Let me give my time and attention, give my streaming money, give my airplay time to this New Zealand artist. Even though I know it's going to be more popular to do this, even though I feel like I'm missing out here, even though I feel like, it's not going to be as cool, I'm not going to be seen as cool, I'm going to do this because ultimately I see the end goal and I see it's going to help. Like, we have to be conscious consumers of New Zealand music, I think. Conscious consumers of local music. Because that will transform our industry. Like I say, like, you spend a little money here and there on shows, you help build these artists up to one day be the artists that, cost $300 to see. And yeah, I just think it would be a beautiful thing to build up the culture and the mana of New Zealand, to have a flourishing music scene here. I'm not saying it's not flourishing. In many ways it is, but it could be way more.
Better.
Way
Bigger, better.
Way more. Yeah.
Yeah, man. So besides the your plans to put out music, a single every 2 weeks that you already told us about, what are some of the other future plans that you have or that you're working on, or when is the next show that you think you're gonna be putting on?
Yeah, man. I don't know. So when I finish this 2 weekly thing, my plan is to redistribute all the songs that I put out as an album, like a body of work, just so I can like sort of reintroduce people to the music that I put out earlier, the fans that I got along the way. And then when that is a body of work, I'm obviously going to look to celebrate that with a show or a tour or something like that. So yeah, I'm thinking of something like that, maybe around August. And then, sorry, people really loved that sort of series I was doing it towards the end of last year, where I was covering other Aoteoroa artists in my own way. You know what I'm saying? So there's been talk of like a season 2 I don't know why I'm saying there's been talk as in there's like rumors in the community where the community is me. But like I'm thinking about doing a season tour of that and maybe branching out to some overseas artists and doing that kind of thing. But like in lieu of the conversation we just had, I'm still passionate about highlighting our own artists here. Like that was the whole point in doing it. Other people are like, oh yeah, you should do this band, this is from overseas. I'm like, yeah, but like my whole thing isn't really just like it, obviously to get me some shine, but also it's like to give some shine to our people here. So might do some overseas artists, but I still want to do some New Zealand artists, and you just put out some more awesome, interesting content. But I think the overarching theme for me is just being more regular and consistent.
Yeah, talking about the local artists.
Yeah.
Who are some of the artists that work with you, or who we should know more of about?
Yeah, so I definitely think Podizo, who opened for me yesterday, deserves a lot of shine. He's a real talented musician, one of those guys where anyone who's a real serious artist who's seen him play just knows the talent that he has, and like he will be a star. And get on the bandwagon while you can, kind of thing. A few like amazing wahine in his circles are killing it. I see Juju Lips coming up, Takunda coming up. I see my boy Bice coming up from Zimbabwe. D Matthews, my boy, my Nigerian dude, he's making some killer Afrobeat at the moment. Yeah, a bunch of like really cool young African people who are coming up just deserve a lot of shine. Chica, I mentioned her. I haven't mentioned her already, but she's killing it as well. Yeah, I'd say those.
Man, that's quite a few names you dropped already, but yeah, man. Once again, Mazbou, thank you so much for your time, for coming here today, doing the podcast with me, man. And you've shed a lot of light on a lot of things.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of other questions that I have, but we'll have to keep that for another time.
All good.
And I'm definitely sure this is not the first, this is not the last podcast we will do. I'm sure I'll see you again, and wish you nothing but the best. And I hope to see you do big and great things. Mazbou, thank you very much for coming.
Appreciate it, bro.
All right, guys, if you stayed this far, thank you very much for watching, listening, and see you guys on the next one.
Ooh.
Thank you for watching this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and I'll see you on the next one.